Good morning, good evening, good night, depending on the place of the world you are. You can see I flew to Norway. I am southwest of Oslo, and I came here because I want to talk with Chris. Chris is a lovely guy that he's doing too much for new startups and the entrepreneurship community around the world. So, welcome to the show. Welcome to One Coffee with R. Bienvenido a un café con R in Spanish. Thank you for being here. And I would like to also tell about Foundation Calanit, which is our sponsor to this show. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I love these coffee conversations around the world. So, welcome to Norway.
Thank you much. Well, Norway is always awesome to be here. I like Norway. I've been, kind of discovering Norway, and people is nice. And well, let's go to the show. And tell me, how was your inspiration to start your company and what you are doing across the globe and also around the globe?
Thank you very much. Many years ago, one of my business coaches said, "Chris, you have a challenge. You like difficult stuff." I'm like, "Yes, I like difficult stuff," and that's basically the gist of it. I have been running my own advisory and consulting firms for more than 22 years, and the background for strategy tools was really my PhD work in Copenhagen some time ago, where my lovely academic advisor said, "Chris, what you're doing here is incredibly exciting. It's really valuable, but it does not fit in the PhD program. You should take it out of academia and into the world." And that's what we did.
Oh, wow. So that's a good start. So let's go now to your place, and I would like to know, how is your path to build national startup ecosystems around the globe?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's also a big question. I think, if you look at the potential, if you look at the needs, pretty much every country in the world, from Egypt and Libya that we work with in the Middle East, to Kenya and South Africa and Africa, to Panama and Guatemala and Costa Rica and Latin America, to Singapore, Malaysia in Asia. Like, every country is competing on the quality of its innovation, startup, and venture capital ecosystems. And I've had the pleasure of working in this space now for quite a number of years. And I've worked with prime ministers and presidents. I worked with ministries and government officials. I've worked with innovation agencies and associations. I've worked with accelerators and heroes like yourself. And I think we just need a lot more entrepreneurship, and we need a lot more successful entrepreneurship around the world.
And about your stories about being in Middle East, Africa, South America, Latin America, is there anything in common between the areas? Because I think that when you want to be an entrepreneur, there's something that it comes from your mind and from your heart. And I think that we should have something in common around the world. But you've been there, so you should have many success stories about doing this one.
No, indeed. And, we've been there. We're going again. We're doing a lot of work in conversations like this one online. But I think, at the gist, I find two sets of people, two different types of people. One is the startup hero, or the startup founder. And this person, male or female, he or she, really wants to start a company, identify a market problem, and kind of go after that problem. And those startup founders are everywhere. And they're exciting to work with, lots of challenges, lots of ups and downs, but they're really exciting to work with. But the people that I work with mostly are the ecosystem builders. They're one or two steps behind. And they they don't necessarily want to build a startup. They want to enable, thousands of companies. They want to see dozens of new accelerator programs. They would like to see 50 new venture capital firms. They want to build out the national fund of funds for example, Egypt. They want to do things that have a national impact. And those people are really the ones that I get to spend time with, and they're moving the market. So we have the startup founders, and then we have the ecosystem builders, and we need both.
So when we're talking about the ecosystem builders, and I know you have a kind of a strategy and a way that you have created in your own company. How does it work?
Yeah. So there are a couple of different answers. So some countries want to develop their national innovation system. And a lot of time that comes out as what we call innovation clusters. So around the world, there's about 7,000 innovation clusters. Colombia has 105. Canada has 5. Denmark used to have 40. Now they have 12. So these are national vehicles built around specific industries, organized in a non-profit organizational structure. So these innovation clusters are a very powerful way of driving national innovation policies. Then you have the startup ecosystem. And the startup ecosystem is sort of a subset, but it is more loosely organized. It is more bottom up. It's built on the founders, the accelerators, the angel networks, and all those early stage pieces. And Chile, for example, is known for having a very active startup ecosystem, while other countries are still trying to develop theirs. But then we have our latest area that we do a lot of work in, which is around the venture capital ecosystems. And this is something we've been working on now for a couple of years. And it's basically a question of how do we bring in more qualified capital? How do we build more local, regional, national investment firms? How do we not get more startups, but more people starting venture capital funds? And that's a really interesting discussion with a lot of work needed. So innovation clusters, startup ecosystems, and venture capital ecosystems, that's kind of what we work with.
And there's any strategy or any business models or how you train the trainers? Because when you go, let's say, let's touch base in Africa, you go to Kenya. And how do you go? How do you approach? Because I'm trying to do this question just because when people will listen to us, I would like to, to shout out to the world. I mean, this is the way that you guys can sit down and can build this one. How do you do it?
Yeah. So first of all, Kenya is a fantastic place, and Nairobi is a beautiful city. And there's a lot of development. There's a lot of activities. There's a lot of things going on, both in Nairobi, in Kenya, and East Africa. But the question is, how do we approach this? Well, there's a couple of different ways. So one of the things that we've found is that in very underdeveloped, immature ecosystems, you usually rely on international finance organizations, the likes of MasterCard Foundation, Visa Foundation. You have DFIs, you have USAID, GIZ, FMO. So you have a lot of these international organizations. In Europe, for example, that is the EIB and the EIF, the European Investment Fund. And those international organizations do a lot of work in the early stage or the early maturity stages. Then as this market matures a little bit, you typically have national governments. And national governments being, the presidents and prime ministers, national task forces, national entrepreneurship ministries, special national programs where they're trying to build up. So some of the work I do in Canada is at the ministry level, for example. And then finally, you have sort of the private sector. And if we go back to your question around Kenya, I think we're at a stage where there's a lot of activity from the private sector coming in, sort of building on the international development, building on the government initiatives, and now expanding into more funds, more investment vehicles, more accelerator programs. And you're starting to get more private activities really flowing in. So we call this a combined top-down and bottom-up, where you need to have both pieces. And you really want to activate your top down, but you absolutely need your bottom up. People like yourself that are kind of just putting in the energy and getting this work done.
And when you go, let's continue with Kenya. You go to Kenya and you sit down with whatever, with the authorities. You sit down with the startup community. Is there any methodology that you use in your programs that will show a different way to do things?
Absolutely. And maybe not a different way of doing things, but maybe a better way of doing things, which is two sides of the same.
Okay.
Now, if we take a step back first, so a lot of the work that we do is built on my initial research around working visually. So at Strategy Tools, we have developed a large number of visual canvases for entrepreneurs, for ministries, for ecosystem development, cluster development, and all of this is open source on our website. And then we've also developed a lot of simulations that are, again, the whole idea is for people to work visually, which drives a very different way of learning, understanding, and working. So when we go into a country, and again, we'll just take Kenya as one example, we can do a typical 3-day masterclass. We can do a masterclass on how do we build more venture capital funds in Kenya? How do we get more startups and scale-ups in Kenya? How do we improve the national competitiveness in Kenya? That's a 3-day masterclass. And then we can do longer programs, those are typically between 1 month to 6 months. So those are really interesting. We have some of them going in the Middle East right now. But we also do the longer term engagements, typically a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year contract, where we work mostly on the public sector side or the government side. And we advise, we shape policy, we write reports and recommendations, and basically helping the local champions build out the national programs they need for the future.
When we talk about the local champions, how do you recognize that you have this type of guys in those countries?
Oh, that's great.
To be a champion, you need to be a champion. You need to train, and also to have the mentality. And there should be kind of something that it's behind those guys in order to be a local champion.
Yeah, no, indeed. And, what we've always found funny is we identify our target user or target champion. And it doesn't matter if this person works for a economic development agency in the United States, in Norway, in Switzerland, in Dubai, in Malaysia, because the personal characteristics are the same. It's someone that is very impatient, very ambitious on behalf of the country or the state or the region or the city. Someone that really wants to drive change, like we call it the entrepreneurial change maker. And it's someone that is really willing to kind of bust through walls and find ways around whatever obstacle is to develop that region or city or country. Now, we recognize these people across cultures, and when we find them, we cling on to them and we work with them and we try to support them as much as we can, because that person is so lonely against all the obstacles and all the challenges they need to face and work through. And I'll tell you a quick story from some of the work that we did in Malaysia some years ago. So we found this person, and he was the CEO of something called Magic, or effectively the National Innovation Agency in Kuala Lumpur back then. And he was so ambitious on behalf of the country, and he really wanted to drive change for Malaysia and the Malaysian startup scene. And, it was just a privilege to get a chance to work with him and his team and see how he built out the network and basically rallied people to the cause. So those are the people that we frequently work and support around the world.
Great. So and that guy in Malaysia, did he make the change in Malaysia? You have follow up.
No, he did. So he's been doing some amazing work, and then like often happened, there's a government change. Malaysia is a little bit unfortunate because the government got kicked out, and there was a certain corruption scandal, and then someone
Yes.
got arrested, and things got a little bit complicated, and a lot of the initiatives that happened back then was kind of just cleaned out by the new government, which also happens. But that's part of the dynamics of building these ecosystems. Some of the research that we've done on this typically show that these initiatives go in for like 5-year waves. So you have a national champion, and he or she got about 4, maybe 5 years to get good work done, and then things change a little bit up and down. But over time, those 5-year waves add up to something significant.
And can we talk about a little bit about angel networks and venture ecosystems? How do you think that those should be prepared for the future? Because I'm trying to look ahead of time. I mean, 2030, 2040. How do you see those networks working?
Yeah, great question. So angel networks are incredibly important. And I think that most angel networks around the world are really underperforming against their potential. Now, if we start in a place like maybe Silicon Valley, very mature ecosystem, very experienced participants, people know what they're doing and how to make that sort of network work. If we go to a place like Switzerland, so Switzerland is a place that we've done a lot of work, and they've developed really, really impressively over the last 10 to 15 years. The angel network scene in Switzerland has gone from 0 to hero in the last 10 years. And the biggest network called SICTEC, they got about 450 members. They have about 7 or 8 people full-time staff. They have a membership fee. Like, it's really grown up. Then you go to more emerging markets, and again, we can use parts of Africa or maybe parts of Asia, parts of the Middle East, where I think the interest is there. People want to become an angel investor. People want to join angel investor networks, but they still need to do all the work of building out the competencies, the skills, the training, the deal-making experience. They need to have what we call the successful deal manager, who's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and they just need to get deals done. And those deals don't need to be big deals. They can be small deals. I mean, you can start your angel investing very, very small, but you build the experience quickly over time. So I think angel networks are incredibly important.
And venture ecosystems, how you put all this together? Because Switzerland, it is a good example. And what I'm listening now is that there are a lot of things to make and to perform in the emerging countries. And how do you work with the venture ecosystems around the world, especially in the countries that you assist?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question, my friend. And I think that over the next 10 years, that's really what me and my team are going to be spending a lot of time on. Because I think what we have found in our most recent research is nobody really knows what a venture ecosystem actually is.
It is. You're right.
And that's a problem, because everyone has their own definition, everyone has their own perspective, everyone's doing something, but it's really lacking that sort of overarching strategy. And what we are doing right now, I'm actually doing a program in Canada later today, is we're working with the policymakers, we're working with the change makers, we're trying to build a common understanding, a common language, a common base to work from. And it's going really, really, really well. Now, we can go into a lot of the details, but in a very short definition, a venture ecosystem is the other side of the coin for the startup ecosystem. So you have your startup founders, and then you have your investor founders. We count how many startups do we have? We count how many funds do we have? We ask ourselves, how can we build more accelerators to build better startups? But we should also be asking ourselves, how can we build more GP accelerator or venture capital accelerators so we can develop more venture capital funds in our country or region or ecosystem?
Okay, great, 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 great. Time is flying, and I would like, to make this program as always in a 20-25 minutes time program. How do you see the future for all this? And I would like to go to the developing countries because there's a lack of I think innovation, and there's a good potential. How do you see the futures for the emerging world?
Yeah. So first of all, I think what's happening right now is that we're seeing sort of a creative explosion around AI in capital. And developed markets like California, so the US coast, California and New York, parts of Europe, parts of the UK, parts of Asia, they have a massive advantage right now. And the amount of creativity, the amount of investments, the amount of wealth that's being created in those hubs, just ridiculous. Now, I think that the rest of the world is really trying to catch up. And I see so much good work. I see a lot of good initiatives. And I'm very, very positive for different parts of the world to quickly be developing and accelerating their different ecosystems. So I'm very positive for the next 5 to 10 years around the world.
Well, well. Okay, Chris. Well, thank you very much for these minutes. I think that our audience will enjoy or is enjoying these ideas, and I think that your last message is very good. I'm also very positive about the future. I mean, there's a lot of creativity around the world. We only, like you're doing, put all these sticks together, all these cubes together in order to have a better life in the future. Chris, again, thank you very much. And for our audience, please join us because we will have the next coffee with art. It will be also exciting and very, very helpful for you guys. Thank you very much, Chris. Bye now.
Bye bye.